investors today as the countries negotiating with Iran are taking stock after Tehran balked at one element of the deal, a commitment to ship its stockpiles of atomic fuel out of the country.
ISIS is still on the march. Al-Qaeda remains a force to be reckoned with. Iran is making America look like a fool over nuclear talks, and Yemen is now nothing more than a big war zone. And it all will face America sooner rather than later. Let's welcome into MidPoint retired U.S. Army Special Forces Lieutenant Colonel and military advisor for the Concerned Veterans of America, Scott Mann joins us. Scott, it's a pleasure to see you again.
Hey, Ed. As always, it's good to see you again. Thanks for having me on.
As we look at what is happening in the negotiations with Iran, is there any doubt whatsoever in your mind that as the Iranians say, oh, wait, we have something that we don't quite agree with, that they knew full well they would go right to the 11th hour and they would try to make America look foolish?
I don't think there's anything in how they're behaving right now, Ed, that should surprise any of us. Yeah, the whole thing is duplicitous and it doesn't surprise me at all, frankly.
But here comes a new piece of all this. Now we have an Iranian journalist, and again, we use the word journalist because that's what we're told this individual is, by the name of Amir Hassan Motagi. He's writing about nuclear negotiations between the U.S. and Iran. He has defected, and he says, quote, the U.S. negotiating team are mainly there to speak on Iran's behalf with other members of the 5+1 countries and convince them of a deal. That would indicate that America is doing whatever they can to make sure that Iran succeeds. If he is correct, that's frightening to think.
Yeah, I mean, it's absolutely stunning in the sense that, you know, you talk about a power shift in the Middle East. I mean, I was just talking to a few contributors to the you know, the Nonprofit Stability Institute that I run, and I mean, this could change the entire power balance in the Middle East. And I just can't imagine what the logic trail is going into this. It just makes no sense from a strategic perspective at all.
Scott, please go into detail there for the people who may not understand. When you say it will change the balance of power, many people still see Iran as a country run by mullahs. They're not necessarily that powerful. This is the public perception of what Iran is. How would it change, and how would this affect the basic everyday American?
Well, I mean, first of all, just their anti-American and their anti-Israeli, just vehement hatred is overtly obvious, you know, at every turn, and has been, you know, from a historical precedent perspective. I can't see anything that would lead us to believe that these would be, you know, solid collaboration partners in a nuclear deal. There's nothing historically in how they've worked with us from the time, you know, the Iranian hostage crisis until now, you know, them fomenting instability with the Quds forces during the Iraqi surge. And even today, look at how they are fomenting instability with the Shia-dominated government in Iraq and most recently in Yemen. The work that they're doing to push instability there is off the charts, and it seems to me like we're almost rewarding that behavior with how we're doing this nuclear deal with them.
Then what, in your opinion, would be the reason for America to, as this defector said, argue for Iran?
Again, you know, from my perspective, I can't see a logical reason unless there's some kind of concern, you know, that Israel is the only, you know, nuclear hegemon in that region, the only one with that kind of capacity. But again, that just doesn't make any sense to me from a national security or even regional security perspective. Even if you just take, for example, Ed, the simmering Sunni Shia feud that has been going on for centuries, you know, between the Sunnis and the Shia, that is a long-standing feud. And you know, it's not just Israel that's concerned about a nuclear Iran. I mean, Saudi Arabia and many of these other Sunni countries are extremely concerned about that. And I really believe that ideologically, Iran would pursue some pretty bad things if they had that kind of capability against its neighbors.
30 seconds left, though. Isn't it fair to say that because it's a very educated population in Iran, many of the people there are pro-Western, that it still behooves America to make sure that we do not go into there militarily and we at least attempt to bring them back into the fold of reasonable nations?
Look, I think that's a spot-on assessment, Ed, and you and I have talked about this before. My book, Game Changers, that's coming out, one of the things I keep pushing forward is we really have to do a better job of working with the marginalized populations in all of these areas, from Yemen to Iran to Iraq. There are a range of clans and tribes that don't buy into what's going on and are willing to push back. we're not working with these organizations at all, and we're missing serious strategic opportunities there.
Lieutenant Colonel Scott Mann, please stand by for a couple of moments. We'll take a break. When we come back, Yemen, a nation that is better described as little more than a kleptocracy. If you know the meaning of the word, you'll know it fits. We'll make it fit. It means nothing but trouble for the region and for America as we have a nation that is in complete free fall. That's next, right here on MidPoint. Back to work and returning to MidPoint, retired U.S. Army Special Forces Lieutenant Colonel, military advisor for the Concerned Veterans of America, Scott Mann. Lieutenant Colonel, let's go ahead and turn to Yemen right now, a country that I don't think I'm incorrect if I characterize this as a country that is now in complete free fall, correct?
Yeah, I think it's looking really bad in Yemen, and you're right, I think, to diagnose it that way, Ed. And what really concerns me about that, as you know, is when a country gets to that point where you have essentially a fragile state that is very weak and can't project beyond the pavement, as I like to say, and the clans and the tribes that normally kind of balance that out are falling apart as well. That is the perfect strategic safe haven for groups like Al-Qaeda and ISIS to set up shop and project globally. That's what I'm concerned about.
What is it that we should do, I guess, is the better idea here? Because now you have certain countries forming what could even be called maybe a Middle Eastern NATO to try and put everything together here. And we're worried about our security, our drone strikes, our drone launching capabilities. But honestly, at this stage, is there anything we can do, or do we just need to sit this out?
Well, first of all, I think it bears repeating that, we missed an opportunity with the president that was there before he left. We just kind of left that guy high and dry. And
which we do many times. I mean, that's another
thing
too, Lieutenant Colonel, we got to talk about. We do this at an incredible pace where we are backing people up in different countries and we let them slide. The Kurds are a prime example, and this administration is doing nothing about it.
Look, I've seen this happen in several countries right now, and with the Stability Institute, our nonprofit, I'm constantly talking to the guys and girls working in these dark places, and it's starting to resonate that when we go into these places and we dabble and we work with these clans and these tribes and these groups, and they put themselves at risk, and then we bail on them, that's just not a good way to do business. People take notice of that, and in this situation, we completely let a presidential administration fall. And so I really think we need to take stock of that. As a matter of course, that's not a good way to do business. And now to worry about our drones and our ability to do surgical strike, I mean, I get that to some degree, but if we haven't figured out by now that that's not going to solve the problem alone, drone strikes, we're in trouble. We've got a lot of work to do besides just using drone strikes. We've got to get into these marginalized areas and work with some of the groups that are willing to push back. The Houthis are making a real play for control of Yemen right now.
Saudi Arabia airstrikes in Yemen. Plus you have the Iranian government that is backing the Houthis, who are now overrunning Yemen and basically taking control of that country. Would you guess that the Iranians, knowing how they think, that they might actually be dying for a fight against Saudi Arabia, because that's the way it looks right now, a proxy war that could turn into a full-blown conflagration?
Well, so there's two things that you've said that I want to walk back to with that question. Number one, we talked about the fact that there are a lot of educated folks in Iran who see what's going on right now and aren't necessarily in favor of it. And so for all of the mullahs in Iran, they have a vested interest in exporting instability outside their countries and pushing it into other rough places so that it focuses that internal attention abroad. That's number one. Number two, this is a great way to look at the Sunni-Shia dynamic in action. Look at how Saudi Arabia is responding to the Iranian, proxy war here. And then we want to ask ourselves, is a nuclear-armed Iran really a good idea?
It would seem not to be, but then again, let's bring up the ally situation, if you will, because we're allied with Saudi Arabia and we're not with Iran. Oh, wait, we are basically aligned with Iran in some areas. It's an absolute mess that we've created.
It is, and from a strategic perspective or a policy perspective, I'm really having trouble getting my head around it. I think a lot of the folks who are trying to execute these actions are having trouble getting their head around it, and I think we're sending certainly a mixed narrative, if no narrative at all, And again, you know, Iran, they're real clear on what they're doing and what their goals and objectives are. ISIS, Al-Qaeda, same thing. They have very clear historical narratives that resonate at a local level, and it mobilizes people to action. When you have that kind of narrative and that kind of momentum and that kind of dynamic between the Sunnis and the Shia, you have a real problem brewing here. And when you add in a strategic safe haven like Yemen, that's just falling into chaos, it has all the makings of a disaster.
About 30 seconds left. I would imagine that you maybe even had a little bit of an amusement as well when you heard Bashir al-Assad on 60 Minutes on Sunday talk about winning the hearts and minds of his people. That seemed rather strange coming from a dictator who knows that the U.S. isn't going to push him out no matter how hard they try.
Yeah, and a guy that makes no bones about gassing his own people. You know, I mean, this is all, you know, that was all, you know, playing to the media. And this guy, you know, he's a bad actor. I think though, one of the things that we have to consider with Assad and these other guys, a lot of these tin pot dictators and autocrats in these places, is that when we go in there and you break it, you buy it. So if we're going to go against these guys, you know, regardless of who it is, these autocrats, we need to have a plan in place for what we're going to do at the local level to address it when they're gone. And if we do take some kind of steps to pull him out of there, or, you know, push him out of there, I certainly hope we have a better plan in place for what we're going to do after the dust clears than what we did in Iraq and Afghanistan, because that didn't go that well.
Which we're not good at all. Lieutenant Colonel Scott Mann, thanks so much.